Going back to the MRI thing, I'll just start that story from the beginning as well. So my dad drops me off at the hospital, and he's just gonna stay in the car, stay in the parking lot. That's fine. I'm 22 years old, or at least I was 22 when I got the MRI. I'm 23 now. Uh, I'm 22. I'm an adult. I can handle myself. So he drops me off at the hospital, stays in the car. I walk into the hospital. So I'm sitting in the waiting room, and it's fairly empty. If I remember correctly, I'm the only person in there. And then some other kid, about my age, walks in the waiting room about 2 minutes after me and sits down as well. So we're both in there, waiting about 5 minutes. Then some nurse walks out, looks at him, and says, "Oh, are you Caleb? You're my last appointment of the night. Come back with me." And he stands up. Sorry, bad grammar. He stands up and walks back with her. And I look and I'm like, I'm Caleb, and I'm the last appointment of the night. And I'm sitting there like, I know I'm not in the wrong place, because this is the MRI section of the hospital. Like, this is a huge hospital. Each wing of the hospital is a different section. And the wing I walked into had MRI written at the top of it. So I know I'm in the right place. But I sit there. I don't interrupt because I think, I'm just going to wait it out. I'm going to wait it out. And I listen. I listen for a little bit because I can hear her and him talking as she takes him back to like the little office area down the hallway. And she's talking with him, asking him his name, his questions, and he must have lied to her about what his name was. Because there's no way this guy's name was also Caleb. But maybe he was. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But then she's asking him for his insurance. And she's like, "Oh, your insurance is not what, the doctor you signed up with gave us. Like, that's different insurance. And like, this is different information. Are you sure? Like, you're the correct person that was supposed to be here tonight? Like, I don't think you have an appointment here tonight." And like the longer they talk, the more and more the nurse figures out that he's not the correct Caleb, which just starts to make me laugh internally as I'm sitting there in the lobby of the MRI wing of the hospital. So eventually, after a couple of minutes of talking, the nurse kicks him out of the office, and they both together walk back to the lobby section of the hospital. So he leaves. Nurse looks at me, still sitting in the lobby, and she's like, "Are you Caleb?" And I go, "Yep." And she says, "You're my last appointment of the night." And I go, "Yep." And we walk back together. So now I'm filling out the paperwork, giving her my insurance. She's like, "Oh, okay. So yeah, you're my last appointment of the night." And again, I'm still just laughing internally because I'm like, how the heck did this kid think like he could just steal my identity with me sitting right there? And maybe that's me over exaggerating. Maybe he wasn't trying to steal my identity. But on a less exaggeratory um, notion, how did this kid think he could just walk into a hospital and get an MRI? Because, like, I think that's what he was trying to do. This guy really thought he could just walk in and get an MRI like it was a Subway. Like he's just gonna walk in and order a sandwich. I don't get it. I really don't get it. It was so funny to me. But I'm like I said, I'm filling out this paperwork, giving the nurse my insurance information, and doing all the stuff I need to do. And after I'm all set, ready to get my MRI, she hands me this sheet of paper. She's like, "All right, so when you go in to get your MRI, you're gonna have the opportunity to listen to music if you want to." And we have this sheet, this list of different radio stations you can listen to, and you can pick one, and that'll be the music we play. So she hands me this laminated sheet, this laminated list of music. And let me tell you, this piece of paper must have been 20, 30 years old. And it was laminated, but like I said, because it was so old, it didn't even matter it was laminated because it was still just falling apart. Even though it was laminated, it was crumpled. And it was so old that the newest thing on there was like Johnny Cash and 90s like techno music. Like 90s dance rave music. And I didn't know what to pick. I looked at her and I'm like, I don't know any of this. And she's like, well, you can do the MRI without music. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do an MRI without any sound in my ears. That sounds like the worst decision I could make. So, after rereading over the list, and again, recognizing none of the names, none of the artists, I just picked the 90s techno music option. And I'm like, all right, this is gonna suck. So, I hand it back to her. Then she walks me down the hallway, further down into the hospital, and takes me into this dressing room where I'm supposed to put on this hospital gown. Now, dear viewer, dear listener, let me tell you that I have never in my life been to a hospital before this. I probably should have prefaced the story with that. I have never in my life been to a hospital before this. So, for that reason, I have never put on a hospital gown. Therefore, I put it on backwards, and it had like a giant hole in it that was just showing my bare chest. I didn't really care because, I don't care if they see my bare chest. It's a little hairy, but whatever. But it was so embarrassing then when the doctor, like the MRI doctor, knocked on the door of the little changing room to pick me up and take me to the MRI room, to take me to the actual like machine that was going to be scanning my brain. And I opened the door and he's like, "Oh, you put that on backwards." This is the first thing the doctor said to me. The first thing that the man who's supposed to be scanning my brain says to me is, "Oh, you put that on backwards." It's like, okay, this is gonna go great. This is a great first impression I'm making with my MRI doctor. I didn't know how to put on a hospital gown, okay? I had no clue, and it was so embarrassing. And I just accepted that there was going to be bare chest throughout my MRI. All right? I should not have accepted that. I should have maybe thought a little deeper into it. Maybe should have made a connection that how do females wear this? Because, females aren't just going to be walking around hospitals open tit. That doesn't make sense. But I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that because, I don't know, maybe I'm just a misogynist. I don't know. Clearly. But it was it was embarrassing. Anyways, after that little robe debacle, after that hospital gown debacle, he walks me over to a scale where I get weighed and my height is measured. Then he walks me over to the MRI machine where uh, I lay down on just a flat board and he goes to hand me a pair of headphones. And before he puts the headphones on me, he's like, "Oh, I know they handed you a sheet of paper where you can pick music, but we actually have Pandora, so you can pick whatever music you want." And in my head, I'm thinking, "Thank God, because I did not want to listen to 90s techno music." So I go, I respond to him, "Awesome. Can you just put on Glitch X City?" And he looks back at me like I'm crazy. and I realized maybe too much of an ask. For those of you who don't know, Glitch X City is a Pokemon remix artist who very few people, basically no one outside of the Pokemon community, will know of. Clearly, this man did not know of them. So he looks at me like very confused. He's like, Glitch X City? Like, and I'm like, yeah, they're just like I just said a techno artist to make it simple for him. I just said techno artist out loud to him, just to try to make it um, the least confusing, I guess, because I didn't want to explain Pokemon remixes to my MRI doctor and have that conversation before he was scanning my brain. But he asked me to spell it for him. I spell it out loud for him. He's like, all right, I can do that for you. And he puts the headphones on me. I lay down flat on the board, and then he starts pressing a button that then moves the board I'm laying on into the MRI machine. So now I'm inside the MRI machinery, or I don't know. I don't know medical terms, but I'm inside the machine. He then leaves the room, goes into a side room where he can start doing the process of scanning my brain, and he turns on the MRI and also turns on the music, which was beautiful. Love Glitch X City. Her Pokemon remixes are amazing and phenomenal. It was beautiful. Great music. But he turns on the MRI, and the MRI is so much louder than I thought it would be. It was just like making these clanking noises and these buzzing noises all around my head. And it was a little scary at first. But what was funny is he turns on the music at the same time he turns on the MRI. The music starts playing for a little bit, and before it even gets halfway into a song, I hear his voice in the headphones, and he goes, "Hey, if you need me to turn down this music, I can turn it up." Or no, sorry. He said, "Hey, if you need me to change the volume of the music, I can turn it up or down for you." And I then realized, oh, these headphones not only have a microphone for me to talk back to him, but he can talk to me, which which means he's listening to this Pokemon remix music with me. Like he can hear this Pokemon music with me, which is so funny to me. So I'm like, oh, I guess he's gonna learn what Pokemon remix music is today. He gonna learn today. So I actually responded. I'm like, can you turn it up a little bit? And he did, which was very kind because, like I just said a little bit ago, the machinery around me, the machinery moving around my head, was so loud, and therefore him turning up the music in my ears helped drown that out a bit. Um, but as the MRI continued, uh, it it was normal at first. It was fine. Uh, and I should say, before I get too much further into the story, that my MRI was 15 minutes of just normal, basic MRI. And then they stopped and injected I forget what they called it. I think they called it a contrast in my arm. They basically gave me a shot in my vein, and it was a fluid that would go into my brain. And then they did 5 more minutes of an MRI so that they could see and contrast my brain with that fluid. I'm explaining it very vaguely and very simply because, again, I'm not a medical person. Uh, so I'm not going to try to act as though I know what I'm talking about. But with those two things combined, my MRI lasted about 20 minutes. So the first 10 minutes of my MRI was fine. I'm just laying there, chilling. I'm vibing to Pokemon music. I feel, excuse me, hiccups. Uh, I feel normal. But then, after about the 10-minute mark, I don't know if it was sensory deprivation. I don't know if it was me getting psyched out, but I just felt like I was starting to lean or tilt to my right, as though the board I was laying on was slowly tilting to the right, which I know was not happening. I know that was impossible. I know, and I knew in that moment that the surface I was laying on was completely flat, completely parallel to the ground. I knew that it was not slowly tilting to the right. But for some reason, in my head and in my body, it felt as though I was slowly tilting right, and my body was shifting right, like I was going to fall off the table, like I was going to slide off the table. And for the next 5 minutes before it stopped, that way we could take a break and inject the fluid in my arm, I actively felt as though I was going to slide off the table to the right. And because of that, I was almost like instinctively leaning to the left a little bit. Like my body was kind of tense and leaning to the left. I can't explain it. It was the weirdest thing. And I told the doctor this as we paused and he was injecting the fluid in my arm. And he said that no one had ever said that or told him that they had felt such a thing before. Like I was the first person to ever experience that. And I don't know, man. I really don't. Like I felt like I was gonna fall off the MRI table. Not fall off, but like slide off. And because of that, like I was awkwardly like leaning to the left. And I was low-key worried it was gonna mess up my MRI results, but it didn't. I found out later and during that day that everything was fine. Um, and the results came back fine and nothing got skewed or anything. But thankfully, after he injected the fluid in my arm and I went back in the machine for 5 more minutes, that feeling went away, and the last 5 minutes of my MRI were fine, and I felt fine again. And yeah, I was once again just relaxed and listening to Pokemon music peacefully. Though, one thing I just remembered, uh, in the last 5 minutes of my MRI, um, I learned that they didn't have the premium version of Pandora. So I'm just sitting there listening to Pokemon music, having, machinery loudly whirring around my head, loudly clanking next to my head. And then as one Pokemon remix ends, before the next one begins, a Charmin Ultra Soft ad just starts playing loudly in my ears. So, as an MRI is happening actively, I just have to listen to these, you know, giant bears talk about how much they love wiping their ass as I'm having an MRI happen to me. As I'm taking an MRI to the skull, I have to listen about how much the Charmin bears love wiping their ass because this hospital doesn't pay for Pandora Premium or whatever. I I kid you not. It was so stupid but so funny at the same time. Um, but yeah, it was funny. It was a fun way to end the MRI. And then I got out. Doctor asked me how it was, if I had felt that sensation of falling off again. I told him I did not, so that was good. I talked with him a little bit more about how everything had gone, and then I left the hospital after getting changed and taking off that stupid hospital gown that confused me.